Hi everyone, so I'm pleased to announce we've got version 1.0 out for our API. So I want to do this video just to give you a quick rundown and show you the features of it and how you can use it yourself. So first of all, where do you get it? Well, I've got packages here on SourceForge. So if you go to sourceforge.net/projects/OurApi and /files, under this files tab here, you'll see I've got versions for Linux, Windows and Mac, all 64-bit versions. So you can download the appropriate one. So for this example today, I'm going to be using the Linux version, but it works exactly the same way if you're on Windows or Mac as well. So what we do is you go on here, click the one that you want and download it, and you'll get a zipped package here. So the whole thing, our API, is self-contained. It doesn't need anything external and it runs within a folder system. So what I simply do is extract the archive here, so unzip it, and we get this self-contained folder. So I'll just open that up and you can see in here there's a few files. We're going to probably using this one and this one, but you run the program using main. So if you're on Windows, that will say main.exe. If you're on Linux or Mac, it'll just say main. So on Windows and on Linux, you can just double click on that and it launches the application. But if you're on Mac, at the moment, you have to run this from command line due to some path issues, which I'll fix for the next release. But if you're on Mac, you would open up a terminal and it would be the same command as I'm doing here. Even though I'm on Linux, it will be the same command. You cd tilde, and assuming you put it on your desktop, move to desktop and move into that folder, OurApi, which will say OurApi Mac, not Linux. Then from there, you just simply go /main and it will launch the application for you and everything should run fine. But as I said, if you're on Linux or on Windows, you just need to double click this one here. I'll leave this window to the side here because we will come back and have a look at that. Okay, so what we have here running is the OurApi application. So what's going on is in the background here it's running a web server. And we can do different requests and see what's happening live as we're running. So to give you an example of this, I'll connect to it a few different ways. One, I'll go back up to our browser here, and I actually had one open here, but I'll start a new one. What I'll do is I'll use a browser to query the local machine, and I'll use this. You can see I've typed it in before. I'll use this function here. So what I've done here, as I said, on this machine on port 8000, which is where our API listens, on our API there's a function called country info, and it needs some variables. Well, it needs one variable, country, which I've allocated there to be Australia, and you can see it's given me back some information about Australia in the form of a JSON string. Now if I go back to the application, you can see in real time it's taken that request and it's told me that there has been a URL request, and that's the URL that's come through. Its type is of a GET request. It's on the same machine, 127.0.0.1. The return port that's been negotiated for our API to communicate back with the browser is that port, and the variables that will pass through were these. So the country variable with the value of Australia, that was passed in through the URL because it was a GET request, and that's the information that was passed back. Now I'll just show you another method. For instance, a lot of people might be doing testing APIs through using different programs. So I have a program here, there we are, that's in PHP. So I quickly did a little PHP script, and that's going to run the same function, but it's going to put in the information Brazil. So if I run that bit of PHP, we can see it did a request to the server. You can see the variable over here now is Brazil. That's the information it passed back, and you can see that that's the information I got back from my little script. So far I've done it through a web browser, and I've done it through a little script there using PHP. Now our API was written in Python, so here's going to be yet another version of connecting, because I've got some little convenience windows down here. So if you see these buttons here, test client, so this is a little client that you can open up, and this is in, as I said, in Python. So what we can do is we can set the function, and we may as well do the same one again. Oh, actually no, I'll do a different function. I'll list countries, and I'll run that, and you can see I've got a great huge set of results here. So that's listing every country. Now over here you can see that that's the raw JSON that I've returned. That's a lot of it, but you can see in this convenience client here, I've got it in this lovely little tree structure for you, so it's manageable. So you can see there's 24 different countries returned. If I open up number 2, you can see that's Australia. If I open up number 1, you can see that's Argentina. So if I went back up here, you can see results. There's a list. The first one in the list is Antarctica. If I go up there, you can see Antarctica. So we've got this nice little convenience window. We can do GET requests from here. So if I close that one for a second, and we'll do a POST request, and then I'll come back and have a look at the GET again. So if I set the functions and I use the country info function, and I add a variable country, and we'll use Canada. If I put them in there, you'll notice that I've got a variable down here, country, which is Canada, but the URL just simply says API country info. I can run that and I'll get my information back. The reason why the variable isn't part of the URL is because we're now using a POST request, so it's in the payload of the request or sent as form data rather than in the URL itself. Whereas if I did the same thing with the client and we run the same function, country info, I add a variable country and its value will be Brazil, and I run that one. Well, I put it in there. You can see the URL now has API country info @ country equals Brazil, so it's putting in the variable as part of the URL. So URL encodes the request as opposed to POST. So you can use both of these little convenience functions here, these convenience clients. So either way, however we connect to it, we've got our web server running. Okay, so another little interesting thing I can look at before I show you how to manipulate the API itself and put in all your own data and your own queries is I'll just show you this save session function. So whatever queries that we've done against the server, we can actually save that session. So I'll click save session, I'll put it on our desktop, and I'll just call it test server, save that, and you'll see a text document has now appeared on my desktop. And if I open that up, you can see it gives me a history of all the requests that have gone to the server. So we had Australia, Brazil, countries, we had these were GET requests, so I'm guessing after here we got our POST, yep, we got our POST request, and so you can keep a history of it. So you can go through a series of steps. If you want to keep that information of what happened, then you can just save it to a file. At any point you can reset the session so it starts from scratch. So if I save that now, overwrite that file, yes, I want to overwrite it, and I open it up, you'll see it's now an empty file because we've got no session information in there. Now, just before I move on, I just want to also show you something in case you're in a classroom situation. This server is also listening outside of just this computer. It listens on the local network as well. So what I'll do is I'll do a request from another machine that's on this network at the moment. So I'll do that request now, and you can see it pops straight up. So I've done a request from another machine on the network, requesting the information for Antarctica, which has come through. But the interesting thing you can see here is the IP address is 10.0.1.109, whereas if I check the IP address of this machine that I'm running the server on, then you can see it's actually 10.0.1.105. So these are two different machines clearly. So I'm also listening to the local network. So you could set one of these up and have some students from their own machine run some queries back and forth. Maybe you put this up on the projector, ask somebody to make a request, and you can see it going back in live, hands-on example of it running. Now, how do we manipulate this so we have our own set of functions and variables and our own data? Okay, well, in this folder here that we launched the program from, you can see I've got an SQLite file, and I also have got this file here, definitions ini. So you can replace this SQLite file with any SQLite file you like. So there's ones online that are free and open source you can put in there, and you can use that data, or you can make your own. As long as you drop the SQLite file in here and rename it to API DB, then OurApi will automatically use that database. Then what you do is you go into definitions.ini. You can open it up with any text editor you like. Notepad++ on Windows is a good one because it's got the highlighting as well. On here, Kate's fantastic. It's a good editor on KDE desktop. But whatever you use, it doesn't matter. What you do is once you've got your SQLite database that you want to use, you can set different functions. So we've been using list countries, country info. I could have also used country info brief. So what you do is you set a function. So you say when the call is made, API and then the name of the function. So in this case it's country info. Then I want to run this API call here. What I say also is for this particular one, I need to have some arguments. If you look at list countries, it takes no extra information, so it's set to none. But up here, we need the argument of what country do you want us to give you the info for. Maybe you might need another variable as well, apart from country. Maybe it's historical database and it gives you information about that country from a particular year. So if I had more than one argument required for this call, then you can just put them all on this line and just put a comma in between them. Okay, in our case we only need the one, and then you give it the SQL that will get run for that API. So you could very quickly, very quickly and easily build your own API. You drop the SQLite file that you want in there, you go in here and you say this is going to be a function. Okay, these are the arguments I need, and this is the SQL that will run, and it will return what gets returned from that SQL query back to the client. So you'll see here I've called in an argument of country, and you supply something like Antarctica, Australia, Brazil, whatever it is, and then it will run this SQL and it'll put the value of that variable. So if I pass in country, if I pass in Antarctica to country, then this part of the SQL will be replaced by that value. So that will become Antarctica. It knows to do this because it's got this little colon in front here. So what you do is you say I want information on the country, and then in your SQL with a colon you say this is where I want that variable to go in my SQL. So if I pass in Australia to country, then it will say where name equals Australia. Okay, and it's as simple as that. And I'll just quickly, last thing is I'll show you this working on the fly. So if I open up my client here and I do list countries, okay, and I run that, you can see I've got my result. You can see all the JSON behind there. Now let's go into this file and say, well, I'm actually going to rename that. Makes no sense to call it list country, but let's just do it for the example. And then I save that file. Now let's go back over here and run it again. You'll see this time I get an error, a 404 error. Okay, because that function no longer exists. I changed it from list countries to list country. So you can see I can update this on the fly in real time. My message here is function supplied was list countries, but the API functions expected is one of those three. At the moment I've only got country info brief, country info and list country. So they're those ones there listed at the top here, but what I gave it is not one of those. So if I now set the function to be list country instead of list countries and run it, well then you can see now I get the proper results. Okay, and it's listed in order of the country. So again, if I went in here and changed ascending to descending, save that, rerun the query, you can see now that we've started off with the United States and then the United Kingdom. I'll jump down to 7 here, Nigeria. So you can see it's now in a different order in China, so on. Okay, so you can edit this live. If you make a mistake, then it'll error out and it'll tell you. But yeah, it should be a really nice little tool to build an API for your students, or even if you're a developer, using it as a rapid prototyping tool for an API. So you can throw something together, get your database sorted out, your queries all sorted out, have something running, an API that's actually working, then eventually replace it with a proper robust version that's running, you know, a commercial grade web server such as Apache or Nginx. I think that just about covers it. Let me know if you have any feedback, if any bugs pop up. I've done a little bit of testing, and I think I've only had one crash in the last 24 hours, and I couldn't reproduce it. So I'm sure there's a bug in there somewhere that one of you will be able to find it for me, and I'll be able to fix it. But if you come across any other bugs, any issues, there's even a couple of extra features I'd like to add to this later on. So if you've got a feature request, you can always ask that as well. There's some interesting little things here, like I've got our API image goes here. So this is only an initial version. I'd like to do some UI improvements and so on. But right now, it should be functional, and you should be able to get some good use out of it. I look forward to hearing some of your feedback.